Welcome into another edition of the FutureSox RoundUp. My name is Elijah Evans, and I am joined by one of my co-hosts, Dylan Barnas. We are back. Baseball is coming. By the time you're listening to this, the White Sox will be a day or maybe 2 days out from their first spring training game this weekend. We are super excited. It's finally here, Dylan. This is the time we've all been waiting for. College baseball kicked off this past weekend, which for those that watch is really fun. I've never been a college baseball fan in the past, and I've being in college, like my final year of school right now, I finally have gotten into college baseball the past 2 years, and it is really fun. It's a totally different type of game, totally different energy than pro, but college is going. Spring training is starting. The Dodgers and Cubs kick it off. We're recording this on Wednesday, the 19th. The Dodgers and Cubs kick off spring training on the 20th. Baseball, it's time. Dylan, how are you feeling as we get ready for spring training games to start this week?
Like I said last week, we're just a couple steps away from baseball. And at the end of the day, it's baseball. I don't care. We could lose 115 games. It's a game. And 115 games would be an improvement on last year, as sad as that is. But it's baseball. It's baseball. I'm just glad that it's back.
Yeah, no, I'm here for it. We're ready for it. We're pumped. We got a lot to talk about today. We got a fun episode for sure. We're going to start with some news off the top, talk about a few different things that happened in the past week for the White Sox. Then we're going to get into kind of the roster outlook, talk about the roster locks, and then the roster competition spots. I think there is somewhere between probably at least 7 to 12 spots on this roster that are pretty up for grabs in spring training right now. So we're going to kind of go through the offense and the pitching, talk about the spots that are generally a lock unless something crazy happens, and then the spots that are an open competition for a handful of guys that could fit into those final roster spots. Then we are going to talk Luis Robert, a few little ideas here for last minute trades. It's hard to see a trade coming together that, a team feels is appropriate value to give up for Robert. And also the White Sox think is not selling short, right? Like it's unlikely, but we saw a Dylan Cease trade last year in March in spring training, the middle of the spring. The White Sox made it happen. They got value they thought was appropriate. The Padres got a player they were looking for, and it happened at the last minute. So we're going to talk about the few teams that could realistically swing a Robert trade this late and into spring training, and then just kind of give a little bit of an idea of kind of what those packages could look like or players that could be coming back to the White Sox if a Luis Robert trade were to happen at the last minute. But yeah, that's a lot. That's what we got going, Dylan. So let's get into it. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Off the top, a few little news things this week. Blake Larson went down with Tommy John a few weeks ago. Unfortunate news. We just talked about him as a possible breakout candidate last week before we knew this. But Larson is, that's comp B, so the back end after the second round draft by the White Sox last year. This is a guy, high school arm, a ton of arm talent, but had a minor injury surgery last year after being drafted, ends up undergoing in Tommy John this year. So we're going to basically not see him pitch for 2-ish years after being drafted by the White Sox. A bummer. What do you think and what do you make of kind of Larson moving forward now that, we're not going to see him pitch till mid to late 2026 when he was a 2024 draft pick?
He always has had high relief risk. He didn't pitch much in high school, and being a high school arm, he's obviously not bulked up to throw 100 innings straight out of being drafted. But I think that with this Tommy John and the other minor surgery that he had on his shoulder, right after he got drafted, I think that the reliever risk is now very high for Larson, and he'll be 20, close to 21 by the time he even makes his debut.
Yeah,
I know he just turned 19 and he just had Tommy John a couple weeks ago. So it sucks because he's got a crazy fastball slider combo that I think if he does shift into a bullpen role and can still maintain that stuff after surgery, I think that he'll be more than fine. But, you drafted him with the idea of making him into a sort of Noah Schultz light in down the road, 2027, 2028. But, I do think that there's still an opportunity for starting because you got Tommy John out of the way right now. You would rather have it done now than, in a couple of years when he's close to the big leagues or has already made his debut. And then it's another year or so that he gets wiped out. But Tommy John sucks. We all know that. But if there was a time for a young pitcher to have Tommy John, it's right now. You would prefer that it just gets over and done with now than lose out on a year when you're already in the middle of your career or close to making your debut.
Yeah. It sucks, right? Like the baseball world right now, like a lot of guys, most guys that have crazy arm talent and funky, any sort of funkiness, or even just generally good pitchers, right, are getting two Tommy Johns in their lifetime,
Yeah.
right? So like, it's a big bummer. You never want to see that. At the same time, can he recover and look really good from now in 2 years? Like, there's a world for sure, and I think he's in that archetype of the powerful arm, lanky lefties, right, that the White Sox love and are coveting right now.
Hmm.
So we'll see where that shakes out. I can see him figuring it out for sure. I
Yeah.
don't think I think he's still going to be, I think he's a top 30 prospect for us right now, right? And like,
Oh yeah,
how do
100%.
you rank a guy, right? Like, how do you rank a guy you've never seen pitch and in the organization? He only threw at IMG for a handful of innings in high school, right? So it's like, we'll see what happens. Still very hopeful, but a bummer for sure that Larson goes down with surgery this early in the season and has to miss out on his whole, just year of development. Another small thing, Owen White claimed by the White Sox, former Rangers top prospect at one point. But Owen
Yeah.
White is someone who has definitely struggled the past few years, hasn't been able to quite convert his stuff into results. Only pitched in 5 major league games across the last few years. Last year in AAA was just getting blown up for the majority of the season. Do you see Owen White having any chance to crack this roster realistically, or is it more of just a claim, put him in AAA and see if you can develop him a little bit?
I think it's just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing if something
Yeah.
sticks because, I mean, he was a top prospect for a reason. You hope that he can work with Bannister and, maybe regain some of that prospect status, maybe become a decent long man out of the bullpen. But, I think at the end of the day, he's just an organizational depth guy. I don't think anybody's expecting
Yeah.
him to crack this roster.
That's where I'm at too. So agreement there on that front. Let's get into the roster. Let's talk about kind of what these positional battles look like. Who's kind of got a spot locked up versus who is still battling to see where things go in terms of going forward. We'll start with the catching spot and then we'll work our way up towards the pitching throughout the offense and then pitching. We'll finish on pitching from there. I think there's a very open competition between 3 catchers right now for
Yeah.
2 spots. And I think that it's really easy to look at the roster and say there's 2 catchers on the 40-man. You've got Matt Thaiss, who's a veteran, signed to a 1-year deal. You've got Corey Lee, who was there last year, has, a year and a half of big league experience. Go with that. They're on the 40-man. I get the atmosphere. A lot of people did not like that I had Edgar Caro on my ideal roster for what this team would look like
Hmm.
because, you want to get another year of service time. Sure, I get it. I would not be shocked if Edgar Caro is just the best catcher in camp and they just cannot deny that, right? Like, I think there's a world where he comes into spring training and he's just better than Matt Thaiss and Corey Lee.
Hmm.
Like, he might still not make the roster, but I don't think it's out of the question for him to make the roster. I think that Matt Thaiss is probably the one borderline lock because he's a veteran, he's experienced, he's strong defensively, he's been around, right? But then you've got Corey Lee, you've got Edgar Caro. You've also got non-roster invite. I mean, Kyle Teal's also there. I think Kyle
Hmm.
Teal's probably a step behind Caro. Maybe he isn't. I think they're at similar footing, honestly. And then you've got Omar Narvaez as a non-roster invite as well.
Yeah, I think that in a perfect world, I would take Caro just because get the young guys up. Let's see what they can do. But you mentioned there's 2 catchers on the 40-man, so why don't they just ride with them? And while I get that, there's a lot of dead weight on the 40-man. Like you can DFA and let some of these guys go through waivers, and I don't think any of them are going to get touched. So if it ends up being Caro, if it ends up being Lee, I'm fine with that. I would prefer to see Lee honestly get sent down. Like he has an option left, and he was not good. Past May 1st last year, he was atrocious. I think that I would rather see Caro and start his development in the big leagues than, try and make something out of Corey Lee and maybe flip Matt Thaiss at the deadline. So
I'm with you.
it's
I'm with you. I think we're on the same page, but I also do think there's a chance they try to, they try to let Caro and Kyle Teal both figure it out together in AAA, figure out how the time split's going to go, bring those guys up May, June. They'll both be up this year. I think we finish the season with a Lee Teal tandem a Caro Teal tandem. I think that's pretty obvious, right? I think both, whether Corey Lee's the third catcher, whether he's back in Charlotte, whatever it is, I think both Thaiss and Lee are probably off the roster come, All-Star break, honestly, or come the deadline at least. But I think likely it's Thaiss and Lee, but I would love to see Thaiss and Caro, or even Lee and Caro. I'd be fine with if they just want to say, Thaiss doesn't really serve a purpose, but I do think Thaiss is the likely lock on the roster. Heading into the infield, we both think there's only 3 guys in the infield that are
Mm-hmm.
really a lock, right? I think Andrew Vaughn makes the team, right? This is kind of the last year for Vaughn to show something, right? Like this
Yeah.
is the year. If Vaughn's going to show that he's going to be a part of this future, he's got to do it this year. Josh Rojas signed to a major league deal, versatile infielder, has played all over. He plays second, he plays third. I think Rojas is the guy that they want on this roster, the perfect guy to hopefully have a pretty good season, flip him at the deadline, call it a day. And then Miguel Vargas. I think Miguel Vargas is not going anywhere. We got to see it from Vargas this year. We really got to see it from Vargas. The numbers in AAA have always been good for Vargas. He produced in AAA for the Dodgers too. We got to see it from Vargas this year, whether it's a third base, whether it's a second base, whether they stick him a handful of games. It sounds like he's done playing outfield, but whatever it looks like for him, I think it's a combination of third and second, maybe a little first even if days where Vaughn is off. We got to see it from Vargas this year. I think those are the 3 guys that are locked into this infield roster.
Yeah, I'm with you there, but I wouldn't count out Brooks Baldwin just because he was just so he was so good last year that I think that they sort of have to respect that. But I can see them, giving a spot to I can see them giving a spot to like Lenyn Sosa, Colson if they deem he's ready. But if they don't think Colson's ready, I would say Baldwin is probably the second baseman, maybe shortstop if they want to put Sosa at second. But I think that the 3 that you mentioned are the probable locks. I think that Vargas, I would say that he's the least lock out of those 3. But
interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, yes, of those 3, but I don't see him not making the
roster.
roster.
He's gonna make the team, and I think that I think that he's gonna be fine this year, just because last year was just such a whirlwind coming over from one of the best teams or the best team in baseball, and then coming to the worst team. I just think that it was just a lot for him mentally, and that threw him off his game. And he had a full off season to sort of get used to it. But I think that it's going to be much better for Vargas. There's pretty much nowhere else to go but up. But I think that we're going to see a pretty solid year from Vargas. I wouldn't say anything otherworldly, but I think he'll surprise some people.
Man. I really hope so. I think there's more in the tank there. I think he's got the upside. We've seen it before for years. It just, you got to see it consistently. You got to see a better plate approach. You got to see a little bit more impact with the ball, elevate a little bit more. We need to see him tap into his power, definitely. We'll see what happens there. So before we get to the rest of the infield, because I think the spots up for grab are mostly the infield spots. Mm-hmm. The outfield, it feels like the outfield is set. I think obviously our whole second segment today is about Luis Robert trade possibility, right? So things change if Luis Robert gets traded. Even if Luis Robert gets traded, though, I still think you can run with the 4 outfielders aside from him, right? So there's 5 guys. I think they're all on major league contracts. I think the outfield without a trade is pretty much locked in to be Luis Robert, Andrew Benintendi, Mike Tauchman, Austin Slater, and then Michael A. Taylor, who was signed last week. Those are the 5 guys, right? Assuming everybody's healthy, assuming Luis Robert doesn't get traded, the 5 outfield spots are pretty much locked up by those 5, I think.
Yeah, I don't really think that there's any other outfielders that could even crack the roster. I would prefer those 5 over any other non-roster invites, guys on minor league deals. Pretty much anybody else on the team. Outfield is just there's not a lot of depth in the organization, so they clearly tried to address that in free agency, and I'm fine with that because having this good of a defensive outfield, it hasn't happened a lot.
Yeah, and you get 3 vets, right? You sign 3 veteran guys to 1-year deals. If one of them brings back a prospect at the deadline, or if 2 of them do even, I mean, that's best case scenario, right? Awesome, cool. Call it a day. You figure out your outfield next. You got Braden Montgomery on the way. You're going to sign an outfielder. I mean, next year has got to be the year you sign an outfielder, I think. But in general, hopefully. you sign 3 1-year guys. If any of them bring you value at the deadline, call it a day. The outfield succeeded. Cool. That's how I view it, honestly. And I think even if Robert gets traded, right, you've still got both Taylor and Tauchman who've played center field. Taylor being a really good center fielder, actually, right? So I think the Taylor signing, like we talked about last week, is that insurance policy for Robert. You've got Tauchman and Slater kind of switching off and right. You got the flexibility to have Benny DH sometimes and have Taylor or Tauchman play left. There's a lot of flexibility here. It's these 5 outfielders unless anything changes via trade.
Yeah, I think that outside of an injury, I think that these are the 5 outfielders. And
so then we've got 3 spots. Assuming those 2 catchers that we talked, 3 guys probably competing for 2 catcher spots, right? The 3 infield locks, the 5 outfield locks. 3 spots remaining, going to be primarily at least 2 of them, if not all 3 of them will be infielders. there's a big list here. So I'm going to read these names that we have for 3 spots, the names that we think are realistically competing for these 3 spots. Colson Montgomery, Chase Meadroth, Brandon Drury, who's non-roster, Joey Gallo, non-roster, Brooks Baldwin, Brian Ramos, Bobby Dalbec is a non-roster, Nick Maton is a non-roster, and then Corey Yulks is a non-roster. A lot of names there. We want to see the prospects, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, if they're not ready, that's okay. Like you don't need to rush these guys. You don't want to push them past their limit. Of all those names, Lenine Sosa, that's the one I forgot that I probably should mention first, because that's probably one of the more likely ones, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Of everybody I just mentioned, 3 spots, who do you think the most likely 1 or 2 guys from that whole list to make this roster?
I would say probably Sosa and Baldwin, but I could see them rocking with Colson at short. The organization seems to be like shaping him into like, okay, you're going to be the guy on opening day. And, he's been fielding a lot of questions in the media recently about it. And I get it. But at the end of the day, it's a competition. And if they think he's not ready, or they would rather have Sosa or Baldwin at short, then, that's their decision. But I think that probably Sosa and Baldwin are the 2 that I would say are the closest, or like the most probable. But I could see Colson taking the spot from one of them, and then just pick out a non-roster invite to make the team.
I can see it too, but like I also think Brian Ramos shouldn't be that far behind a Brooks Baldwin, right? Like I get Baldwin last year was really amazing in the minors, right? He was unbelievable. He shot his way to the big leagues. Both of them had a similar situation though. They both struggled. They both got hurt. Neither one of them got a true taste of big league experience, right? They got a little taste, but neither of those guys really got serious run at the big league level, and they both deserved it last year, right? Like Ramos had the weird call-up thing for 2 days, whatever. That was stupid early in the season. Yeah. He got to a point where he was hitting really well in Charlotte. He gets another call up, and then he just didn't quite click, right? Like the injury set him back, all this other stuff. Both those guys were deserving of big league innings at the end of the year. The injuries aside, right? Like I want to see both those guys get innings this year. I think with Ramos, it's a little trickier because you have Rojas and Vargas, who both are third base over any other position probably right now, I think. So then it's like, Baldwin and Sosa, that's your second base shortstop guys who can play more up the middle consistently. So then that's if Colson's not making the roster, right, those 2 are probably more realistic. Of the non-roster guys, who do you – so and then Meadroth, right? I think – I didn't even mention him originally. Like Meadroth might have the best case of all those guys in terms of his versatility and his performance last year, right? Like he has an incredible track record. He was perfect. I mean, he was excellent in AAA last year. On-base percentage over 400 last year. Very good at plate approach. Has played second, third, and short, right? Like that's the guy that probably might make more sense than any of the other young guys, but he's not on the 40-man yet. So that's where it becomes tricky. Do they want to bother taking more guys off the 40-man? Because we're already going to have to see other guys get on the 40-man if they want to make the roster, whether it be Caro, some of the pitchers, right? So I think Meadroth might be arguably one of the best options of these 3. I just am not sure he's going to have an edge over the in-house guys like Colson, Sosa, Baldwin, Ramos.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. But at the end of the day, like I said before, there's a ton of dead weight on the 40-man that you can end up cutting that really wouldn't make a difference to the organization long term. But if they think that Meadroth is the best guy, then I would love to see that, because he's a contact hitting second baseman who puts the ball in play a ton, walks a ton, puts up good at bats. Like I think that he's sort of like Brooks Baldwin plus, essentially. Like he's not gonna switch hit, obviously, but I think that he's got probably comparable bat to ball skills, if not better, and then walks a ton more than Baldwin.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. And then non-roster guys, right? So we mentioned Drury, Gallo, Dahlback, Maton, Yulks. Anybody from that group that you think is most likely or that you actually would want to see the most?
I think that if I had to choose one, I would say Drury, just because he was battling injury and illness last year, and that just it was not a good combination for him. He was statistically the worst player in MLB last year by FWAR.
That's a White Sox signing, huh?
Yeah. I wasn't originally when the signing came in, I was like, really? Brandon Drury's getting a minor league deal? And then I looked at his Fangraphs page, and I was like, oh, that's why. But I think that there's still stuff left in Drury's tank. I think that just it was a combination of the injury and the illness
Yeah.
last year that just it was not a good combination for him. And I mean, he won a Silver Slugger 2 years ago, or was it 3? I don't even know. It was
3, I think, but yeah.
Yeah, it was 3. But I think
I
that
mean, yeah, you look at the numbers, right? Like 2022, 2023, 22 between two teams, he had a 812 PS across 138 games with 28 home runs. 2023, an 803 OPS with 26 home runs across, what was it, across 125 games, right? So that's 2 seasons prior to last year, 2 seasons in a row with an 800 plus OPS and 25 plus homers.
Yeah.
It's better than a lot of players on the White Sox
Right.
can say they've done in their career.
Yeah, like if he can just find some of that back, like I think that he could be like somebody that we're like, oh, how did we get him on a minor league deal, and we end up trading him at the deadline for a better haul than we expected.
Yeah.
I would be fine with that.
Yeah,
It's just
I
tough
think
to
it's
like
him or
slot him
Gallo
in.
for me. Yeah, it is tricky. It's tricky to justify it over all these young guys who are good and are ready, right? If they're deemed ready, right? Like Meadroth, Montgomery, Baldwin, Ramos, like these are all guys that we hope are part of the future. So then what are you doing giving innings to Drury? But if those guys are not performing and they're not, they don't seem like they're fully ready to be big league pieces, then sure, let's see what Drury's got. I think Gallo is an interesting one because I think you could DH him, right? I think the idea is that, he can be your DH against righties. He's a left-handed power bat. He does get a good amount of walks. He's going to strike out a million times, but, whatever. You can, if you want to end up somewhat platooning him with Vaughn, if Vaughn struggles, you can. Or I think if Luis Robert gets traded, that makes Gallo a lot more appealing because then he can be your fifth outfielder if needed / DH space as well. Maybe, right? I think bat-wise, I think Drury and Gallo are the two that are maybe make sense from a non-roster standpoint. Of all these guys, if you were, let's do this first. First, I want to hear the 3 that you would pick, and then I want to hear the 3 that you think will make the roster.
So of the infielders that we just mentioned, like of the competition,
all these guys we just mentioned, the three final offensive spots,
The 3 that I would pick, it would be Colson, Baldwin, and probably Drury, but that's just a ton of infielders, and it's so tough. I could see them going.
You can go infielder though because that's the thing. You've already got 5 outfielders. That's the thing.
That's
You've
true.
got 5 guys who are only going to play outfield, right? So even if Benny's DHing a little, like I think these 3 spots are going to be infielders, honestly.
Yeah, you could make a case for Gallo because I think James Fox tweeted something about this. Gallo was better against left-handed pitching than Andrew Vaughn last year, which is just hilarious.
Right-handed pitching, but yes.
Or right-handed pitching. Yeah, I'm stupid, but
it makes no sense. But it's the case. Crazy.
Yeah, but I think that it would probably for me it would be Montgomery, Baldwin, and Drury, but I think that they're going to go Sosa, probably Ramos, and I don't know. I don't know about that final spot.
I think Baldwin makes it. Honestly, I think
he does.
I do think he makes it.
I think he makes it. So I would say Baldwin, Sosa, and probably Colson. I think that they're shaping him up to be. I think they're like finally ready to say, "All right, here you go. Just see what's there." Yeah.
Okay. I personally, I think I would go. I really want to say Meadroth, man, but I'm not sure it makes sense because the 40 man. Like I do think he deserves a spot on the roster. You know what? I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna go Colson, Meadroth, and Ramos.
Okay. I'm
gonna go with that, and maybe Drury instead of Ramos there potentially if he has a good spring. But I think Colson, Meadroth, and Ramos will be my 3 that I would go with. I think the White Sox will go Sosa, Baldwin. And I do think there's a good chance it's Colson. I think it's Colson or it's either Drury or Gallo. I don't.
Yeah.
It's really hard to gauge with Colson what is the plan, but I do think Sosa and Baldwin are the 2 that I think are most likely to make it. And then that last spot, if it's Colson, he earns it, sure. And if not, then it's one of the non-roster guys in Drury or Gallo.
Yeah, it's just so tough to gauge like what was the real Colson Montgomery last year, just because he went through such a long stretch of not being the best player on the field, and then it looked like he found something at the end of the year, and then in Arizona,
looked good in Arizona, as well.
I think that if he does well in the spring, I think that they hand it to him and just let him run.
Right, I'm with you. All right, going into pitching, and we'll fly through some of these because there's a lot of spots open. I think we have more spots open. Of the 13 pitchers making the roster, I think we have more non-lock spots or maybe even non-lock spots as we do lock spots, right? Starting pitching, I think there's three guys. I think there's three guys that are going to be in the rotation on opening day. One of the three of these guys will probably be the opening day starter. I could flip a coin and figure out who. I couldn't tell you. Jonathan Cannon, Martin Perez, and Davis Martin. I think those are the three guys that are going to be in this rotation for better or for worse. Perez, you're hoping to flip at the deadline. It's that simple. He has a good start. You flip him to a contender. Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you, Martin Perez. Davis Martin, you're hoping continues to kind of find more of what he found last year. He's not a complete product yet. He's still got work to be done. But the White Sox want him to be a starter, at least until all the young guys get up. He will be in this rotation. Jonathan Cannon, last year, rookie season, you're never going to get an ace out of Cannon, but the guy is going to give you good innings. He's going to churn innings. He's going to throw strikes, and he's going to be an arm for you that can be a stable back of the rotation guy. Those three are going to be in the rotation. Agreed?
Yeah, I would say that I don't think that there's a world where any of those three aren't in the rotation, barring injury. I would say that Martin Perez is going to be in the rotation. Like he signed an MLB deal. I think it was like $6 million bucks.
He's $5 million deal, $5 million, and he's a 10-year starter, right? Like he's going to be in the rotation.
Yeah, he's going to be in the rotation. Cannon's going to be in the rotation after last year. Martin is going to be in the rotation. I think there's not a world where any of those three aren't.
So those three, two more rotation spots. We've got 5, maybe 6 names written down, but I don't know. I think there's a pretty clear 5, assuming everybody's healthy. Maybe that's being naive and it's not that simple. I think there's a 5, and I think there's a clear 6, honestly, if you're going to rank the order of most likely to make the roster. But all the guys we have listed for the final 2 rotation spots, Sean Burke, Drew Thorpe, Bryce Wilson, Nick Nastrini, Jairo Iriarte, and maybe Jared Schuster, ? He's starting the first Cactus League game this weekend. They seem to be trying to convert him to be a starter again. Those are the guys we have down for the final 2 spots. I don't see why Sean Burke wouldn't be in this rotation. I haven't, you never know how guys are throwing right now. You never know how they look and how their command is right now coming out of the offseason, right? But I don't think there's a reason Sean Burke shouldn't be in the rotation, given you got 4 appearances out of him in September as a rookie and making his debut, and he looked really good. He was in a per game basis, he was one of the best pitchers to pitch for the White Sox last year. Simply he was. I think Sean Burke should be the 4th spot. Where are you at with that and the rest of that group?
I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I think that Sean Burke should be in the rotation, but he's coming off of a 2023 season where it wasn't great. He was injured, he was banged up, and outside of 2022, he hasn't performed. He hasn't done well outside of high A, and you could make a case for it's not 100% consistent yet. And while I get that, I think that the innings that you saw from him last year are enough to say, all right, you've clearly found something. Here's your chance to prove it over an extended period of time. And while I get that, he's not been the greatest, he was dealing with injury. So I think you can attribute at least some of it to that. I think that he's probably the guy that I would want to see the most just because he has the most upside out of the 6 guys that you said. But I think
I don't know about that, but yeah.
Well, maybe,
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that he's done enough, probably more than anybody else of those 6, to make a case for himself to be on the roster. I think that in a perfect world, he would be my 4, but I could see why he would start in AAA just to get more innings under his belt and get more consistent.
Sure. I can understand that case from the inning standpoint, but I do think he deserves it.
100%,
the rest of those guys, right? I think if he's healthy, it's Drew Thorpe's. But I think Drew Thorpe is still battling this injury. He's still working his arm up. I just don't know if they want to rush him into the season in the rotation. So I think there's a good chance he is one of those unique situations where he is on the IL to start the year, but then he throws 3 rehab starts the first 3 weeks in Charlotte, and he's back in Chicago by the end of April, right? That could very well be the case for Thorpe. It's just a little bit of a delayed buildup, I think. If Thorpe is healthy, I think it could be Burke and Thorpe. If Thorpe's not healthy, the next guy that I go to is Bryce Wilson, just because that was an offseason ad, right? A guy that is, looks like he could be capable of starting. Last year he threw almost 100 innings last year for Milwaukee, right? So he was really good in 2023 as a bullpen guy. Last year he made 9 starts for Milwaukee. He, a 4 ERA last season, threw over 100 innings, 82 strikeouts, right? there's at least a floor there that I think is higher than a lot of these other guys.
Yeah, I think that if Thorpe isn't healthy, which it sounds like he won't be, at least to start the year, I think that they give it to Wilson. But I could see them going with Jairo Uriarte too. Like he has a locker with the other four guys that we mentioned, and while we don't like to see that and say, okay, yeah, he's in the rotation clearly, but at the end of the day, he got called up last year. He was in the a bullpen spot, but I think that they were kind of getting a feel for him. Like, okay, how does your stuff play against MLB hitters? Because he didn't have the best year in Birmingham last year. Like, it wasn't the season that we expected from him going into the year. But I think that the organization is kind of gearing up for him to be one of the better pitchers in spring training. And I think that he could be given a spot because he's already on the 40 man. You wouldn't need to clear a spot for him. I think that if Thorpe isn't healthy, I could see them going with him for a couple weeks.
I think it's just a little aggressive. I think Uriarte has a chance for sure. I think they're going to give him a chance to show that he's ready. It sounds like his velo's back up, which is awesome because last year his velo was down a notch or two from 2023. So good to hear that his velo's in a good place. It seems like, at least right now, it sounds like in general there's been a lot of high reviews about him throughout camp so far. I'm excited to see what he has. I just don't think he's ready to be a major league starter yet, and I don't think he's ready for the innings load as well. Maybe if it's a 3-week arrangement, right, then it's like you just give him a taste. But he already got a taste as a bullpen guy last year. I feel like Uriarte, you just build him up in triple, you let him develop the right way, and that's a guy who you still think is a big part of your future, so why try to push it? Nastrini, I think, will be in AAA. I think he still needs to continue to develop the command. I still think Nastrini is going to find a major league role, whether it's as a starter or a reliever. I do believe in the stuff. I always have, but I don't think it's right now. I think Schuster, I don't know what the plan is there. He's starting the first Cactus League. I think he's kind of found a decent role as a reliever last year, so I don't really see why you're bothering to put him in the starter mix, especially when you've got Mason Adams on the way. He's going to be competing at camp, but he's going to be on the way this season, right? You've got Schultz and Hagen on the way. You've got all these other guys coming, right? I don't really get the Schuster thing. I think it's Burke and it's Wilson with Thorpe on the way in a month into the season. Is that kind of where you're at as well?
Yeah, no, 100%. I was sort of just because you mentioned Wilson, so I wanted to go somebody different. But I think that it's probably going to be Burke and Wilson to start the year, and then Thorpe takes Wilson's spot and probably shifts him to a bullpen spot just because he was really good out of the bullpen, like you mentioned.
He was a swing man, right? Exactly, yeah. So we'll see. So that's where I'm at. The bullpen is really hard to try and put together. I mean, we have 4 guys that we put as locks, but one of them I don't even really think is a lock. Actually, I'm gonna make an executive decision here and take one of them out of locks and put him into remaining because I actually don't think this guy's a lock. Honestly, I just don't think he's even deserves to be a lock on based on last season. The 3 guys that I think are truly going to be locked into this bullpen: Prelander Baroa was exceptional at the very end of the season. That is the guy that you can look at and say there's a world where he's a closer in the big leagues, right? There's still steps to be taken, needs to figure out, he still has command things that he was struggling to figure out last year. He looked really, really good in September and looked like the guy that can be a leverage reliever. Cam Boozer traded for this offseason. You acquired him. He was already a major leaguer with Boston last year. I think he's in the bullpen no matter what. And then Gus Varland. Gus Varland was good last year. It was a waiver pickup, a guy that looked impressive. He's been a social media darling a little bit for the White Sox. He put up some good innings last year. I just think Gus Varland makes this bullpen. I don't really see why he wouldn't. Those are the 3 that I think are locked in the bullpen. I think the rest of this bullpen is so incredibly up for grabs, and we honestly have no idea. So I'm going to name every name that we have listed here, and then we've got 5 bullpen spots to fill. So let's talk about them. Let's figure out, who do you think deserves to be in this bullpen? Justin Anderson, that's one guy who could be considered a lock because he's been with the team for a little bit, but I don't know. Fraser Ellard, Jordan Leisure, Shane Smith, and Murphy, Owen Wright, recently acquired, Tyler Gilbert, Brandon Eisert, James Karinchak, Jake Eder, Steven Wilson, Jared Schuster, and Trey McGough. Oof. It's a list, man. It's a list. Oh, yeah. It's a list, and it's very tricky to figure out who is going to make this roster. I couldn't tell you. Where are you at? Who do you think should make it? Who do you think is going to make it from some of these names?
So my bullpen in my 26 man that I put out a couple weeks ago, it was Justin Anderson, Gus Varland, Fraser Ellard, Tyler Gilbert, Cam Boozer, Jordan Leisure, and Prelander Baroa.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it. I like it
yeah.
a
And
lot.
then
I
I
like a
have
lot of those.
yeah,
I
and
don't
then
know
I
if
have
I'm
Bryce
completely
Wilson.
with one or two, but I like a lot of those. For me, I
I have
think Eller
Bryce
deserves
Wilson
a
listed
spot.
as a 6 man.
Yeah, I like that. No, I
So
like
like
that.
he's
I
like
think
a 6 man that is going back and forth.
sure, the swing guy, right? I think Fraser Eller deserves it. I think Fraser Eller
100%.
looked like a big league pitcher last year. He had a really rough, was it either his debut or his second game? I think he got lit up, and then from
Yeah.
then on he was really really solid. Fraser Eller is, the Sox already have a good amount of lefties. It's going to be a lefty heavy bullpen, which I'm here for. I don't mind it at all. But
Mhm.
Eller is a guy that, came up last year. It was his first big league game. He gave up 2 runs in a third of an inning. From then on, he gave up a total of, let's see, he gave up a total of 8 earned runs at his remaining 24 games last season.
Yeah.
Sign me
That's
up.
good.
I think
Yeah.
Ellard is young. He has showed upside. He deserves to be in the bullpen, right? I think Jordan Leisure deserves a shot. If he comes into camp, I know last year was ugly. We were hyping him up last season. I was really excited to see what he had last year. His stuff didn't quite play up. It was ticked down a little. I think it had to do with the injury to a degree. He was out most of
Yeah.
the season. He ends up missing, I forgot how long he was on the IL for. He pitched in 30 games, and he had a few good moments for sure. I don't think he was at his best last year. I think he wasn't fully healthy for most of the season. And I think Jordan Leisure is talented enough where you want to see that in the bullpen this year because he's an upside guy, like an Ellard, like a Baroa. Those are guys you can actually see becoming a legit piece. From there, Justin Anderson is likely. I don't really need to see it personally. I don't really like. I think he makes it, and I think he had good moments at times last year. He churns innings, but at the same time, like I don't need to see it. I don't feel a
They
need
gave him
for it.
money. They gave him money in arbitration, so that's the only reason
Yeah,
why I think so.
you're right. He probably that's a great indicator at that point. So he probably does make it from there on. Shane Smith, I think they're going to want to try to make a spot for him because he's the Rule 5
Yeah.
pick, but I could see him getting beat out for sure. I think of the non-roster guys, I think Penn Murphy's interesting. Penn Murphy's a guy that I liked a lot when he was in Seattle a few years ago, and I think he has upside to at least be decent, get you a prospect at the deadline maybe. James Karinchak is one that is like – James Karinchak also is not officially listed on the roster, by the way. I'm not sure if you saw like on the non-roster invites, he's not even on there. So I'm very curious to see if he is with the team or if he's –
Yeah,
I
he
don't know
was.
because
I saw him
it got reported, right?
Yeah, I saw him
So
in like a video.
maybe it's just maybe it's one of those opt out contracts where he has the option to, if he doesn't make the roster,
probably.
he can just opt out, and it's not an actual minor league deal. It's just an invitation basically.
Mhm.
So I think that's an upside guy. Maybe I think I want to see Trey Mago make the roster at some point. I just don't think he can with this many guys competing for it. I think he probably comes up in early to mid season. Tyler Gilbert was added via trade. I don't know. There's a lot of ways it can go. I think for me, the 6 that I would lock in personally would be Baroa, Boozer, Varland, Anderson, Ellard, and Leisure. Those are the 6 that I'd really want to see, I think, above anybody else. Beyond that, it's really anybody's guessing game at that point. Brandon Eisert is like a funky sidearm lefty. That's the guy that I could see the White Sox saying, "Hey, we like that. We like the uniqueness there. We'll try it out." Right? Like it could go a lot of different ways. The bullpen is going to be a huge toss up beyond Baroa, Boozer, and Varland. We think we'll see.
Yeah, I think that Gilbert is more of a lock than we're giving him credit for because we did trade and
Aaron Combs.
Aaron
That's
Combs.
true.
We did trade Aaron Combs for him, just drafted 8th rounder out of Tennessee. So I think that
good point.
He's more of a lock than we're giving him credit for, but there is a world where he just gets beat out and has to spend some time in AAA.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's so many lefties. That's the thing. That's why I'm a little worried for somebody like Ellard. I'm a little worried because Ellard, I think, fully deserves it more than most of these guys. But because he's a lefty, because he has options, maybe he's the guy that misses the cut because there's so many other lefties. Assuming it's a Gilbert that's making it as well.
How many lefties do you think we roll with?
I think the White Sox, at least 3. I think maybe 4.
I would
honestly,
say 3. I would say 3. You can make a case for 4 if Schuster makes it in the pen.
But then
I don't think
you're not. So Boozer for sure. If you're
Boozer,
putting Gilbert
Ellard,
in there,
yeah.
You think Boozer, Ellard, Gilbert? I'm good.
Boozer, Ellard, Gilbert are like my 3 that like I could see.
I'd be perfect. I'd be perfectly
like those
good
are
with that.
three.
I think that makes sense. I think those are the 3 best options at this point, at least in terms of left-handed relievers. So, all right, we are at 40 minutes already. So we're gonna do this in 20 minutes now, but we're gonna pivot. That's our roster outlook. That's what we think it's gonna look like. Things can change. We'll see. Injuries, overperformance, underperformance. Who knows? I will be keeping everybody updated when I'm in Arizona in a few weeks of how this might have shifted, how it could be shifted, how it sounds like it's shifted, all that stuff. That's where we're at right now. This could change if there is a player that's traded, right? Where you have to slot in another player into that infield mix or to that, offense mix. Luis Robert, I don't think he gets traded, Dylan. I think it's going to be a little too hard compared to the Cease thing to find the value that both sides see for him because his value is so hard to figure out right now. If he does get traded, we both think there's 4 teams that could be legit able to swing a trade, have a need for him, justify the cost of him, and have the prospects that the White Sox could be interested in when it comes to trading Luis Robert. It has to be offensive prospects. We've talked about this from the start. No matter what this deal is, it has to be centered around a legit offensive prospect and a second quality piece. I don't think this is like a 4 prospect trade. I don't think there's any world this is,
No.
I don't think this is the Crochet trade, right? It's not going to be that level, right? But it's going to be at least 2 prospects, one being a legit high level offensive piece, I think. I think you have to get a guy you can put into this core mix as an offensive prospect to make this trade worthwhile for the White Sox. The first team we're going to go with, the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds are making moves. They've had a quiet but smart offseason, I think, for the most part. I think they're still a step away, and I think they still are looking more at 2026, right? But this year for the Reds is a building year. They've got a lot of young offensive pieces at the big league level. I think we heard this Edwin Arroyo rumor. Typically, when you hear a direct name of a prospect, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And I also just don't think Edwin Arroyo is a good enough headliner. I think I would be really disappointed personally if Edwin Arroyo was the headliner of a Luis Robert trade. If the Reds want Luis Robert and they want another guy that can be an impact piece as they try to push to be, take a next step as a young team, it's got to start with Sal Stewart or Cam Collier for me.
Yep.
I think those are the 2 guys. They're both infield prospects, legit offensive upside, significant pop. Those are the 2 guys I think the White Sox are circling, and those are the 2 guys that I also think the Reds are trying not to trade. It's got to start with one of those 2 for me if the Reds are going to be able to swing a spring training trade for Luis Robert.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think the Reds are more willing to give them up just because they have so many infielders. Like they just traded for Gavin Lux. Like Matt McClain, it's probably going to move to the outfield now. Spencer
I think they're planning to keep McClain at second, is what they said. So they've got a busy.
Really?
Steers full time in the outfield for sure now. So that's But
they have a ton of infielders. So I think that Stewart and Collier are sort of like the odd men out once they if they end up pushing the upper levels of the minor leagues. I think that they could be on the trading block anyways. So I think that Stewart and Collier are both the 2 guys that I was circling from that Red system to headline a trade. If you can get both, amazing. But I don't think that's realistic just because I think Collier was like what, the top 5 pick?
Yeah, I mean, Collier was a first rounder in 2022, 18th overall, and then Sal Stewart, they took these guys back to back right out of high school. Sal Stewart was the 32nd overall pick in the comp round, right? So you've got 2 guys that were both first round picks 3 years ago. They are both, high school draft picks. They've been developing well. Sal Stewart's 21, Cam Collier's 20. And these 2 are guys that, Collier being a left-handed hitter, probably more of a locked in a corner, I think. The ideal is he's 6th, 3rd. Mm-hmm. He might end up shifting to 1st. Stewart is a little bit more versatile, has played both 3rd and 2nd at times. Both guys with Stewart's probably a little bit more advanced in terms of his contact, his approach a little bit. Collier is a little bit further in terms of his power upside and his arm, but isn't quite the athlete, a little bit less mobile, a little bit weaker defensively than Stewart. But these are 2 guys that you got to get one of those guys, I think. And then with the Reds, what do you go from there? Do you want the upside kind of arm in like a Chase Petty, who it's, can the White Sox swing that type of deal? Or do you probably go with one of the younger high school recent picks, a guy like Tyson Lewis, a guy like Sammy Sephora, one of their recent, high school guys where you get the medium developed bat in a Collier or Stewart, and then you get the project bat in a Sephora, in a Tyson Lewis. There's a handful of other guys in that system. I could see a lot of different paths for a trade here, but I do think it's Stewart or Collier paired with a second top 15 guy in the system, maybe a throw-in flyer as well.
Yeah, I would rather have that sort of project bat just because there's not a lot of those project bats in the White Sox system outside of like a George Wolko, Caleb Bonnemer that you can look at and say like, okay, these guys could be a piece of the future in 6-7 years. But I don't think that Tyson Lewis is on the trading block.
I don't.
Like
I don't think Tyson Lewis gets traded just because he was drafted. I think Stafora is
yeah.
more likely. I think Stafora is a guy that was 2023 second round pick, shortstop with legit plus speed. Looked seemingly like could stick at short. Also, Stafora is a
Mhm.
guy 799 OPS last year between Arizona and then Single A. Is that right? I think that's right. I think Stafora, 799 OPS, 31 stolen bases last year, flashed some power, 8 home runs, 6 triples, 13 doubles last year. I think Stafora is a fun idea to
Mhm.
pair with a Collier or a Stewart potentially.
Yeah, no, I can get behind that. And then if they want to do like that sort of lower level arm, I would be fine with
Right.
Julian Aguilar. I know that I
He
liked
got
him last year.
TJ.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
last
did
year
see
too,
that,
but
but I think that
yeah,
his stuff is good enough to be like, okay, you can rehab off TJ, and you're young enough to be a decent part of the future if you can come back healthy and show
right.
that same stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind one of their recent draft picks too. I think there's a chance it's one of their recent guys that went. I think there's a handful of other project pieces like a Peyton Stovall was an Arkansas developed
Yeah,
second baseman, somebody like that along those lines. I could see one of their maybe it's one of their project arms that the White Sox want if they target one of their recent high school draft pick arms that you say, oh, that's an arm that we want to try and shape and see what happens, right? I think the Reds make a lot of sense. I think they have made a
hmm
lot of sense for Luis Robert for a long time. I think they are comfortable with paying a guy at that price. That Luis Robert's, his contract options the next few years. Again, though, like, can you justify trading one of your top two hitting prospects for a guy that is injured a lot, is coming off of a bad season? We'll see. The Reds are
yeah,
generally a pretty cautious team. One team that's not very cautious traditionally, at least the general manager is not very cautious traditionally, and is known for actually swinging kind of aggressive trades at times. The Phillies, Dave Dombrowski and the Phillies. I think the Phillies were the team in the offseason that I saw being the most likely to make a Robert trade. I also think they are still probably a little scared of their future, I think, right now. I
yeah.
think they know that their window is getting shorter and that their team is very old and that they need to try and protect their elite prospects. They already traded Starling Caba this offseason. That was one of their high upside prospects. There's no chance in my mind that they're trading Andrew Painter or Aiden Miller. I don't see even Aiden Miller, like Aiden Miller is their top hitting prospect. I just can't see it even for a Robert. Yes, he would make their team better, but I think they would rather just run out, Brandon Marsh, whatever, than have to trade Aiden Miller.
Right.
From there, though, like my issue with the Phillies is what are you getting that you're excited about?
Yeah.
I'm not super high on Justin Crawford. I think that's the most logical guy because he's an outfielder. The White Sox need outfield. He had an 800 OPS last year. He's a left-handed hitter. He could be in the big leagues by 2026. Crawford's not a bad player. I just am not sure I see the upside. I think his speed is great. I think he's always going to get you, he's going to be a good speed and good defense in the outfield. That's a good start for sure. I don't think Crawford's ever going to impact the game significantly at the plate.
Yeah.
That makes it tricky to make that your headliner, right? Like he's the most logical headliner as a considered to be top 100 borderline type guy. Great speed in the outfield. The White Sox need an outfielder. He becomes your eventual center fielder for Luis Robert, right? I just don't think the bat is there enough to be the headline of a trade, personally.
No, I 100% agree. He hits too many ground balls. If he can fix his swing and elevate the ball more, he's got enough pop to be like, okay, fine, you're gonna survive in the big leagues. But as of right now, like he hits way too many ground balls, and I'm not sure that he ever overhauls his swing enough to lift the ball in the air consistently enough.
Yeah.
Outside of him, you could make a case for Eduardo Tate. He's just another catcher that like the White Sox it's getting to the point of like pitching where the White Sox simply just have too many catchers. Like
Yeah. Right.
you just traded for a catcher. I don't think that you trade for another one that's even
Right.
though he's
And I
younger.
think I think he's with Kaba being gone, he's their one complex league project guy they really like. So I
Right.
just don't see him
Yeah.
being traded. And then from there, it's like Mick
Not
Abel,
much.
nope. I think it's Dante Nori, recent draft pick, interesting. This was their first rounder this past year. Maybe they just say, hey, we don't have room for you. We got it. It's an outfield prospect, lefty, super high speed. I don't mind it. I could get behind it, but like, what does a package centered around Dante Nori look like? I'm not sure that's a
Yeah.
Luis Robert type of deal. I really see this being a situation where they would have to do Crawford plus more, piece things together kind of, and I just don't know
Hmm.
how much I like that. Maybe it's their second rounder this year. Griffin Burkholdt is another super high speed outfielder. Yeah,
Maybe.
maybe out, high school guy, definitely flashed some serious upside. It seems like it just would have to be more of a scrap together package than it would be with the Reds, where like you've got one of two hitting prospects that you want to build a package around.
Yeah, and I think with the Phillies, I don't think it would be just Luis Robert going over. Like I
Right.
think that
They'd want a
there
pitcher
would be,
too, probably.
yeah, they would want a pitcher, and like their core is getting old. Like
For sure.
they could use like a corner outfielder like Schwarber, Castellanos, Harper. Like those guys are pushing 35, if not already there.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
you could toss them Oscar Colas, Dominic. I don't know how much that would
Ugh.
move the needle, but like yeah, I mean, it's I don't know how much that would get you in return, but like at the end of the day, they're not going to produce on the White Sox.
Right.
Phillies might be like, hey, why not?
A project piece. Yeah, sure. So I think the Phillies make sense on paper. I just don't know how it stacks up in terms of what a trade
Yeah,
looks
it's
like.
just very weird.
The next team makes probably the most sense in terms of what they can give the White Sox.
Hmm.
They're just an organization that has shown time and time again the past few years that they don't want to actually make big moves. And that sucks because I like this core. I think this team has the best pitching staff in baseball, probably, even with the Dodgers. I think this team might even have a better pitching staff than the Dodgers. The Mariners are a great pitching team, and they don't have the offense necessary to legitimately compete. Luis Robert in that outfield with Julio Rodriguez, if he is healthy and at his best, that could be an insanely cool duo for that team.
And Randy Rosarena.
And yeah, and Randy, right? That's a freaking outfield right there. I mean, at
Yeah,
their best, that's a sick outfield. But and they also have a ton of hitting prospects. This team is loaded
exactly.
with hitting prospects. Their top six, their top five prospects are all hitting prospects. They've got the pieces. Will they make a big move? I just don't buy it. I don't. They
Hmm.
haven't shown that they're willing. Jerry Dipoto has not shown that he's willing to make a big move necessary to get this team back. What it could look like, I don't think they're trading Cole Emerson.
No,
I think Cole Young is probably still a stretch. I think there's a chance, but I still don't. I think
maybe.
those are the two guys they're penciling in their long-term infield, and those they're probably going to try to avoid trading if they can.
Right.
Like we said, White Sox don't need a catcher. Harry Ford had a bad season last year. Either way, I don't think he makes sense in this type of deal. What I would be looking at if I'm the White Sox is Felny and Celestine.
Yep.
Personally, Felny and Celestine would be the name I'm circling, the name I'm targeting, hands down. Felny and
Yeah.
Celestine was one of, I think, the second highest international prospect in the 2023 class, signed for
Something like that.
4.7 million with the Mariners in 2023. Last year in the Arizona Complex League, you want to know Felny and Celestine's slash line, Dylan?
I would love to know it.
352,
Whew.
431, 568 across 30
Pretty
games.
good.
That's good for a 999 OPS with 17 extra base hits in 32 games.
Yeah.
Felny and Celestine's pretty
Yeah.
good. This
Yeah.
guy's pretty good. This is a 19-year-old shortstop, 6'1", tons of upside. He will be 19 this entire season, too. He just turned 19 in the fall.
Yeah.
I'm all over that. I think, yes, it's another long-term piece, and you're putting that, but like, that's the type of swing the White Sox might have to take here if you're going to actually get value for Luis Robert. It's going to have to be a swing to a degree in most cases. Celestine would be awesome. Lázaro Montes would be cool too. I just think the White Sox are a little terrified of the idea of a likely
Eloy
DH
Jr.
guy. I think he's probably a DH, Lázaro. I think this is a guy who's played some at right field, but he's probably a first base DH long term. Tons of power, tons of upside.
Oh, yeah.
I think that'd be fun as well. But I think Celestine is the first starter. Johnny Formello is another one coming off a torn ACL last year, but the PPI, I think 29th overall prospect promotion incentive pick of the Mariners in 2023. This is a guy that's just a well-rounded outfielder, super fast, good power, good contact, just overall bat there. There's tons of other guys, right? Like Logan Evans, if you want a pitcher, he was great last year. He's going to be in the big leagues soon. Michael Arroyo is a good secondary idea. Ty Pete, two middle infielders that are both. I mean, this system is loaded with hitters.
Yeah.
They're just not I just don't see the Mariners making this move. If they did, I think this lines up really, really well for a Celestine and Ty Pete package, or a Johnny Formello, Michael Arroyo, and a throw-in package. Or there's a lot of deals you could cook up with this Mariners farm system, honestly.
Yeah, it's just so loaded from top to, I don't want to say top to bottom, but like the middle of
one of the best systems in baseball for sure.
Yeah, the middle of that group is just so incredibly deep, where you can piece together even like 3 to 4 prospect package with the guys that are ranked like 9 to 15, and that's
they've got some arms too that I don't want the headline of this deal to be a pitcher, but they've got plenty of arms you could pack into a deal.
Ryan Sloan.
That's a great third. Well, Sloan, I don't think they trade. I think Sloan is going to be a stud.
I would be shocked.
That's an Illinois local guy, Ryan Sloan. I saw Ryan Sloan throw when he was a fall ball freshman of high school because he was in the same conference as me in the same neighborhood. He was a freshman in high school and he was nuts. Ryan Sloan is a stud. I don't think they trade him. I also don't think they trade, regardless. The Mariners probably line up better than any other team, by a mile, honestly, compared to these other teams we're talking about. Like, in terms of what they can offer the White Sox have so many players that would be great to add in a trade with the Mariners. I just don't think it happens, unfortunately.
Nope. I think
all right. On that note, the last team, we'll wrap here. This is the opposite of the Mariners, maybe small market also, so. But they seem like they want to make a move. I just don't know how they make a move.
Right.
Any chance Luis Robert could be a Pittsburgh Pirate? ? It doesn't make sense when you say it out loud, but the Pirates need bats. They need bats badly. They have Paul Skeens. They have Jared Jones. They have a sick pitching. Mitch Keller. They have a sick pitching staff. They need bats, and they need an outfield bat, really. Aside from Brian Reynolds, they need an outfield bat, and Luis Robert makes a ton of sense. How do the Pirates put a deal together where they're still rebuilding, right? So they're not going to want to trade their top guys, right? Bubba Chandler's going nowhere. Connor Griffin's going nowhere. How do they put together a deal that makes sense for Luis Robert if they want to add that big bat?
I don't think that it happens. Like you said, Bubba Chandler isn't going anywhere. Connor Griffin isn't going anywhere. Termar Johnson, I would hate if he headlined a Luis Robert package. Like, he has major hit tool concerns. I know he was drafted high out of high school, and his hit tool was like the thing that scouts were raving about. Just hasn't shown up at all in minor league baseball. And then outside of that, like Braxton Ashcraft, Thomas Harrington, 2 pitchers. The White Sox simply don't need any more pitching. Like, this simply is going to be a package full of bats, or outside of maybe like one project arm, it is going to be bats. And then you got Nick York, Mitch Jebb, Wyatt Sanford. Like, those are the 3 other guys in the top 10.
I don't mind a Wyatt Sanford package. I would not be opposed to that. That's a guy that I think the White Sox could have very much have been considering at the pick where they took Caleb Bonner. He went 4 picks after Caleb Bonner at 47th overall this past draft. Elite Texas high school shortstop, definitely tooled out, hit tool, fast guy. Seems like he's a legit shortstop type of profile. I remember in the draft, it sounded like he was going to be a high-end defensive shortstop. I could see a Wyatt Sanford. I also think the Pirates will be hesitant to trade, their recent high school draft pick. I could see a Sanford-based package making some sense. I know you're anti-Termar Johnson, and I'm not super high on Termar Johnson either.
Yeah.
But it is you do got to look at it a little bit yes, the hit tool has not shown the past few years. 15 homers, 22 stolen bases, 85 walks last year. He has a good plate approach, and he has pop. So I think maybe there's you see Termar Johnson as a guy you can tap into. I still don't even think the Pirates trade him, though. I really don't even think they would want to trade him just because they have so few of those marquee guys. So I think it'd be a Sanford type of thing. Maybe it's Mitch Jebb. I don't know a ton about Mitch Jebb, to be honest, compared to Sanford. It's a less likely situation, but I think it would be a cool idea because the Pirates need a upside hitter like Luis Robert.
Yeah, I think that it's a good fit, but I just don't know how you piece together a deal. It's similar to the Phillies, where I'm not sure that they're willing to give up what the White Sox would ask for. So in an ideal world, he's a Mariner, but it's just so hard to make deals with Jerry Dipoto.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm with you. All right, well, we'll see. There's a chance Luis Robert gets traded. There
Yeah.
is a low chance, but we will see. And those are the four teams that we think could make sense, even though they're still all less likely than more likely. But would be interesting to see what happens. All right, that was great. That was good. We got to look at the roster. We got to consider the possibility of trading the one asset left to trade. And we will talk to you when games are being played. The next time we talk to
Yeah.
you will be when spring training is underway. The White Sox will have already multiple games under their belt. We are super excited. Stick with us. Make sure to keep following along at FutureSox for all the FutureSox content. I'm going to be in Arizona. Our other co-host, Jeff Cohen, is going to be in Arizona with me. James Fox and Ian Eskridge are rolling. Hot Takes and Heaters is rolling now with Jacob and with Jacob and Danny, everything's rolling at FutureSox. So for me, I'm at Elijah EV8. You can follow Dylan at Not Cease, and we will talk to you next time on the Roundup. Thanks, Dylan.
Of course.